Sure. Chair Smith-Crivello, Vice Chair Collins, Commissioner Dawson,
Here.
Commissioner Humbero,
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Here.
Commissioner Rath,
Here.
Commissioner Rodriguez. I'll go ahead and mark Commissioner Rodriguez absent. And then I can announce the staff members that are present are Principal Planner Roveri, Associate Planner Buggert, and myself, Recording Secretary Barrera. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I am Commissioner Rodriguez. I'll mark you present. Oh. Yes, I did. Yeah.
I guess I was, concerned about it. Yeah. It's actually, a hand up and I knew that part. Thank you. Is my on?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, my mic wasn't on. I hope. I saw a little green light, but not a bright one. So the next thing is the open consent agenda. And I don't see any member of the public here today, but there might be somebody online. So
I don't see any attendees online, but I can go ahead and remind the public how to join. Members of the public are encouraged to join our meetings via Zoom Gov, a secure service that connects you live with no lag time. This meeting is also streamed live on youtube.com/Monterey. It's also streamed on Comcast Channel 25. If you would like to provide public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone, making sure to join in time to accommodate delays. To join the Zoom meeting from a computer or phone, use the link or phone numbers on the agenda posted at isearchmonterey.org. To join by telephone, dial 833-568-8864, then enter the webinar ID. Today's webinar ID is 161-739-7120. If prompted for a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions for using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To provide public comment via Zoom, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. To provide comments by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, then *6 to unmute when called upon. Public commenters will be announced using their last 3 phone number digits or the name typed into Zoom. Public commenters will be muted until it is their turn to speak. Please turn off TV or computer speakers or go to another room while connected, as background noise interferes with the broadcast. Public speakers will be called upon in order of hands raised. There is a 3-minute time limit for today's meeting. Please stay within that limit. And there are still no attendees online.
okay, we'll just proceed and maybe approve the minutes. Did we all get a chance to look over the minutes?
Yeah, I have one correction. It
Okay,
shows that I have an asterisk under my name for being not here, but I was here.
Oh,
That's it.
Sorry about that. I'll make a note.
yeah, thanks for noticing.
So you were in the chambers?
Mhm.
Okay.
I think.
I thought you were, does it matter?
No, I was
Oh,
here.
Well,
oh,
the,
I see, participated remotely.
yeah,
via
the
video conference.
asterisk is for Zoom
Yeah,
participation.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I was here.
So we're making that correction.
Yes.
And are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes? I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes of October 13th.
Second,
Second.
Harold Dawson, all in favor?
Aye.
And I guess does it have to be roll call for this?
Yes.
Okay,
Chair Smith-Crivello,
yes,
Vice Chair Collins, Commissioner Dawson,
Aye.
Commissioner Humbero,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Aye.
Commissioner Rath,
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez.
Abstain.
Okay.
all, I guess it passes, so minutes are accepted as corrected. And we'll move on to our first public appearance. Well, it's just our first item.
Thank you, Chair. This is Fernanda Roveri, Principal Planner. I just want to say that this is a huge accomplishment for the planning division and for our city. We reinitiated the Millsack monitoring program. And I think Matthew, as you will see, has done a great job. He was able to visit all the properties in the Millsack program within the span of a year. So that's a huge accomplishment. And he'll explain more, but it was a very big undertaking to contact all of the owners because a lot of them only had phone numbers, no emails. So, and Erica also did a great job of helping to reach out and to contact them. So I just want to congratulate them. And I'll let Matthew introduce himself and the presentation.
Thank you, Fernanda. As stated, my name is Matthew Buggart. I'm an associate planner with the City of Monterey's Planning Division. Today, we're going to take a look at the Mills Act inspections that occurred over the past year or so. Let me share my screen real quick. As Fernanda stated, this took place over about the past year or so. There's a couple at the very end of 2021. As stated, getting in contact with a number of the homeowners proved somewhat difficult in some cases. Not everybody lived at the address. Some people had new owners since the year 2000 or 2003, and just trying to track down the different individuals. In a few cases, we were not able to contact them directly, but many of them are visible from the right of way, and you're still able to see the status of the property. And I mean, you can tell if it's been recently painted. There's taking a look at our building plans, and I'll walk us through it a little bit more through this presentation. So the purpose of today's presentation is to provide a brief summary overview of the Mills Act program. I know I briefly talked about it 6 months to a year ago. Just want to really remind people as to its importance. I'll provide a brief summary of those properties in the city, and also an update on the inspections at large. Finally, there will be a slide with some next steps that we're anticipating following what we've seen from the past year. The first contract in the city was in the year 2000, so this program is about 22 years old now. In that time, the Mills Act has been intended to be mutually beneficial to both the property owner and to the city. The property owner gets a reduction in property taxes, and the intent for that is to rehabilitate the property and maintain it in perpetuity into the future as long as the contract is in operation. And from that, the city is ensured that the historic building is preserved. To become a Mills Act property, it has to meet the requirements for H1 or H2 overlay zoning. It should be noted that not all H1 or H2 properties are subject to a Mills Act contract. We have a number of historic buildings downtown, and you may not see them here in this presentation because they don't technically have a Mills Act contract with the city. A qualified architectural historian needs to identify the property as a significant historic resource, and it has to be noted that granting the contract will serve to offset the cost of maintaining the resource. As part of that, during an application, a maintenance schedule is received, approved, reviewed through the planning division, and it makes its way through HPC, Planning Commission, City Council for both the rezoning and approval of the Mills Act contract itself. So the overall approach to this Mills Act inspection kind of evolved over time. The first few, the maintenance schedules varied from property to property. It's been 22 years or so. So the city took a few years getting a foothold onto what a maintenance schedule would look like and be standardized for this. And what we see in front of us here is what we landed on, which is we'll have the maintenance action itself in the first column, and it might be exterior and then some breakdown of what they would do. There would be a column for frequency, how often this would be done, annually, every 6 years, every 5 years, only one time in some cases. And finally, there was a series of contract years. So this one was started in 2013. So in 2014, they anticipated that they would do, at least in this spreadsheet, 3 actions, and it would cost roughly that amount of dollars. I wanted to point this out because this is what we landed on, and trying to do these inspections, we were using very old maintenance plans that may not include all of this information. One plan, for instance, was Casa Amesti, and there's a few things that I'd like to point out about it. I'm gonna shrink my face here. Casa Amesti is about a block away, right away from here. The maintenance plan is in the upper right. It's okay that it's a little small and blurry. It itemizes what the maintenance task would be, and it has some annual costs associated with it. And at the bottom, that's what I've blown up here. The contract started in 2002, so the first year was 2003. And for the first 3 years, there was a huge garden restoration project that was estimated to be $250,000.
Micah, I need to ask you, what is the address of Casa Meste?
580 Calle,
Okay, I'm sorry.
oh,
think it's
580 Pacific, 570
Well,
Pacific.
I want to point out that these properties are ordered, it appears by house number. So if
Right.
it's 580, that would come after 570, no
It's-
matter the street.
It's 516 Polk Street.
516 Polk.
516, okay, so look for 516. Follow it along as the numbers start with 2-digit numbers and then 3-digit numbers. It's not by street, it's by house number. So that'll help when you point out, if you say the address, then we'll be able to look at the property on the street. Okay, thank you.
That's fair. Yeah, so for this maintenance plan, there was a huge undertaking in the first 3 years where they would do $250,000 worth of work. And then after those first 3 years, they anticipated that the annual maintenance cost would go down in comparison. One thing that I'd like to highlight in here is it was pretty standard for most Mills Act properties to have a few rehabilitation activities, restoration activities, big ticket, in some cases, money efforts. And those might have been done in 2005 or 2008. And since then, they've just been required from their maintenance plan to maintain over that time, whether it be painting, landscaping, and sometimes it was a very simple, like their plan may have only said landscaping. It's like, well, technically, check, they've done that. That's what I wanted to point out with this maintenance plan specifically. On the other hand, there were some maintenance schedules that included no timeline. For instance, 537 Houston Street, this was the maintenance plan that was included as part of the contract. So when it came to doing the inspection, I showed up at the property and we pretty much just walked down these different items, and I asked, how's your drywall doing? How's your roof doing? And taking photos and whatnot. On the flip side of this, some of them didn't include dollar amounts and we'll get to one of those in a little bit, but it just included the maintenance activities themselves and there was no dollar amount associated with it. So in the report that's been presented to you, if the action was done, the dollar amount was assumed to be completed. And in some of these cases, they'd done a lot of work, but since there was no dollar amount associated with the maintenance plan, it couldn't be included in this particular annual report. I will note that that will change in the future, but just wanted to give that context for this presentation. So with that, maintenance plans come in, a rezoning comes in. At this time, we have 60 recorded Mills Act properties. I know in the previous presentation, we noted 63. That was based on our file as to what we had recorded. And we did a comprehensive search of the various Mills Act properties to see what had been officially recorded with the county recorder. And it is 60 properties within the city. There were 3 essentially that there was no final signature. In some cases, the property owner just didn't end up didn't want to finish it. And another note for background going into these is that the city is allowed to cancel the contract if the owner has breached the contract in any form. That means that if they have not done something in the maintenance plan, technically the property is vulnerable to being removed from the Mills Act program. Another reason is perhaps the property is deteriorated to the point that it no longer meets historic property standards, or that they have in general failed to restore, rehabilitate the property. That kind of feeds into the first 3 years that happened for Casa Amesti. The risk of this happening, the cancellation fee is 12.5% of the current property value. And there are exceptions for buildings destroyed by natural disasters such as fire, earthquakes, flooding, and the like. So the results of the inspections, overall, pretty good. The total cost of estimated tasks from all those maintenance plan sheets that are attached as attachment 2 to the agenda report is $7.5 million worth of work. And of that dollar amount, it is approximately $7.1 million worth of work has been completed. With that, taking a look at those maintenance plans, roughly $330,827 worth of work has not been completed. We're going to walk through that and what that means when we actually look at the properties, because what's on paper ended up being a lot different than what's at these homes. I mean, 60 homes, just their property values themselves, it's a lot higher than $7.5 million. The most outstanding task was, as stated in the last assessment, was the historic plaque. 16 of the properties that was not observed on site. In discussion with these property owners, if I was in person, I would note that that was one of their requirements that needed to be done, and hopefully would be hearing from them within the year. There are 4 properties that entered since 2021, so their contracts became effective and their maintenance tasks. There's a number of activities that they needed to complete in 2022 this year. And so for those properties, technically they still have until the end of the year to complete those tasks, so I didn't count it against them that they had not done said tasks. So with that, 56 properties we are assuming need to be entirely compliant with their Mills Act contracts by this year. They need to complete their tasks on their contract by this year. So the number of properties that are 100% compliant, at least in terms of what their maintenance plans had within them, was 23 of the Mills Act properties, about 41% of that 56 properties. If you assume compliance other than the outstanding plaque, it knocked up by another 9 properties to 32 properties could be considered perfect if they just put the plaque on the front. And then one step more, there were a number of properties that had 1 or 2 outstanding tasks. For instance, the fence looked dilapidated out front and could use a coat of paint, or perhaps the retaining wall in front of their house had a crack in it, but everything else, they'd replace the windows. It was usually associated with some sort of maintenance task rather than a structural retrofit that they were supposed to do in the first few years. So looking at that, I like to look at the final number here, that 43 out of those 56 are doing well. They've done what they're supposed to do as part of their contract. And we should be very proud of those homeowners for what they've invested in their property and how they are maintaining that historic resource. So now we'll go into a couple case studies. We're not going to walk through all 56 of these properties because I think that would take a very long time. But wanted to point out a few highlights, some of the rises and the not so good things that were observed along the way. One of them is 62 Ave Maria Road, the Charles Rollo Peters Estate. This was contracted in 2010. And the maintenance schedule estimated that there would be roughly $10,000 worth of work for ceiling beam repairs and stabilization. After all was said and done, in chatting with this homeowner and also taking a look at a previous inspection that was done in 2012, it seemed to be a little inconsistent over time, but that ended up being more like $80,000 worth of work just for those ceiling beams that were put in, 9 tons of steel and pulling the side of the building to make it vertical and basically saving this place. But I just wanted to point out that the dollar amount was not always consistent. It took a lot more work. A couple other things were slightly out of place. For instance, in that photo, you can see a gridwork window there. And one of them was cracked. And even while I was there, I saw a bird hit it. And she had said that, not that specific pain, but just it was broken by a bird is what she had said. And then a bird hit it shortly after, and I believed her. But yeah. 502 Larkin Street had a similar story that was told to me, and I'll come back to that. The maintenance schedule estimated roughly $50,000 worth of work would have to happen in the first 5 years or so. The owner stated that over $700,000 worth of work had gone into the property of supporting beams and doing additions to the house, and they went through HPC a few years ago as well for that structural addition that they did. And that was associated with one of the requirements to remove part of their structure. And in any case, it was a lot more money that was invested into the property than what was put on the initial maintenance plan. 570 Archer Street, the Parmley Mansion, was contracted in 2005. This was a property where their maintenance plan did not have a dollar amount associated with the activities required of the property, but it had a number of requirements on the property that they are still working on to this day. It was recently repainted. I included a photo down there. It was white, and you can see it peeling off slightly. And then today, if you drive by, it looks great from the outside in the street in comparison to some of those historic photos of the place. On the topic of unanticipated homeownership issues, there was a giant water leak that happened midway through my inspection. There's a video here of it flowing. And one portion of their maintenance plan, it was like an inch thick of water just streaming in there. One of their items was to do landscaping, and I have not been back to the property since this happened, but I can only assume that the landscaping might need some touch up after this. It ended up being repaired by the city later that day, but it's something that I look forward to seeing next year. I wanted to include a compilation photo of some unfinished tasks at various properties. A number of maintenance plans and Mills Act homes There's a lot of knob and tube wiring, and it needs they need electrical updates, and some of those homes had not yet had the full scale electrical update yet. Again, I don't want to point out specific people, but if you look at the summary table, attachment 1, it's noted which ones have not yet done some of those activities. There are some homes where they were required to update the windows with period wood. There's multiple homes that still had some aluminum windows in there that needed to be updated. In some cases, there was a retaining wall that's coming down near the property. You can see that on the right image here. There are those all somewhat fall underneath landscaping maintenance and trying to protect that home. The retaining wall here on the right side is leaning towards the home that's on the left side here. So hopefully that'll be maintained. This image at the bottom is an example of a cracked retaining wall that should be repaired and has not yet. Yeah, just there are outstanding tasks at these properties, but many of them, for the most part, other than those 1 or 2 items, have done well. And I wanted to end on a lighter note. There's some of the properties that are wholly compliant and beautiful. The 573 Houston Street was mentioned earlier as one that didn't have a timeline of when they needed to get things done. And despite that, they have maintained the property here very well. It's an architect studio now, and they've maintained the ironwork banister in the rear and the stonework of the outside. And it was still nice despite the maintenance plan not having that requirement, if you will. And then another one, 201 Van Buren, the Perry House. I included 2 photos here, the left being the one that they show on their website. You can have your wedding or corporate event here, and then the next one in is my photo there, and it truly is a beautiful ceiling that they've maintained. And oh yeah, and one thing I wanted to note about this is most of the Mills Act properties are homes and personal people's homes, single family homes, but a number of them are also they've become other commercial uses, and because of that, they seem to have been maintained well as well. Another example is 1130 Roosevelt, I believe. No, I didn't include it here. It was the old Monterey Inn at 500 Martin. That has also been very well maintained over time. They do weddings and kind of bed and breakfast vibe. So it's been a perk for those properties to have those uses. And with that, our next steps is, especially after looking through all these maintenance plans and the timelines and the costs associated with the different items, we started off just looking at the maintenance plans, and since we'd done a number of them that way, we wanted to continue and just finish the exercise and see how everything was. But we want to follow up with receipts for these items. We haven't yet determined if it would be something like receipts for the past 5 years, for the past 2 years, for the past 10 years, whatever it happens to be. But we want to see what sort of annual maintenance cost has been actually put into these properties going forward. Another item is, would really like to survey the interiors of the applicable properties. There are some that were walked into, but for the most part, especially during the waves of COVID that happened through the year, for the most part, elected to stay outside, or some homeowners wanted to stay outside, or whatever it happened to be. And that was absolutely okay and acceptable, especially considering what has been going on for the past few years. And lastly, that we anticipate having a follow-up inspection report at the end of 2023, hopefully with some good news from those properties that may be currently lacking. We kind of saw this as us reintroducing ourselves as the city to, hey, we do need to inspect your properties and maybe have some outstanding tests, but kind of as a reminder to get on it if you haven't for the past few years and make it more optimistic and approachable and friendly than the fact that 50% of them are vulnerable to having their Mills Act contract revoked for not having their plaque. Yeah, so a balance there. With that, that concludes staff's presentation on the matter and are open to any questions. After this, we'll be talking about the Mills Act handout that goes along with this as well. So we do have one other thing that kind of connects to this.
Okay, at this time, we get to ask some questions and I have a couple. What is the obstacle for not putting a plaque on? Did they tell you why they didn't put the plaque up? Is there a concern on the part of the property owners?
I would say in the conversations that I'd had, it was less a concern about it than the plaque requirement is not included in the maintenance plans for any of these properties. It is only included within the contract portion. It's kind of separated, so perhaps they didn't see it. In a number of cases, it seems like they may have forgotten that that was a requirement, or at least was stated that they forgot, but they've been reminded.
Well, it's a great soft way of getting back into supporting the plans that
Absolutely.
they signed. So I understand. I just wondered if they had said something. I think it probably just didn't happen and was set aside and maybe they forgot. And the other question I had was, you said we reviewed, or, this commission 63, but there are 60 actual homes. Do you know which homes fell off the program and when and why?
I could take a brief look in our folder. Uh, 60 Baranda Lane was withdrawn, 498 Van Buren Street was not finalized, and 774 Wave Street was not finalized. Oh, and 1122 Harrison Street was not finalized.
And you don't,
As for the details as to why they fell off, I did not explore too far. The reason that it came up is we had sent letters to all the addresses that were in that folder, which are supposed to be our Mills Act properties. And we got one person who showed up at the planning office saying, we did not sign that. We did not want to sign that. Please don't reach out to us again about that.
yeah.
And we said, okay, we're going to double check the rest of these just to make sure we have it.
Oh, that's good. I think actually that's a pretty good percentage of properties that follow through with it and have been working at several different levels on it. I think that's a high success rating. It was something new at one time for people and maybe they didn't understand all of the details and they changed their mind. And Kathy, you had.
Yeah,
questions.
I just noticed one little discrepancy on the Charles Rollo Peters estate at 62 Ave Maria Road. Our handout says the contract was 2001 and yet your slide said 2010. And I just was wondering which was correct.
It would be 2001. It was
Okay.
one of our first ones.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that typo.
That's okay.
But it's come back to us because of other, I think an artist studio, right? So there are
Correct.
other
They-
reasons that
Oh,
maybe it-
true.
it,
They did
that's
come
right.
back to install an audio studio that had to go through HPC. It's since
Yeah.
been constructed. It's really pretty and cute.
Right. yeah.
They've done some stair work that goes down to it that use some local
Oh,
stone, and
Okay,
it's
2010 then.
it's nice.
so
The original.
I do want to congratulate that property. It's one of the ones that takes the open house once a year seriously. She is an artist, so Elizabeth
Mhm.
does open the house to the public. It's her artist studio and we've been able to visit the house.
Yeah.
about once a year, sometimes more depending on when they have their artist studio open houses and it's really very nice. The that idea of being available or sharing the house with the public, did that come up at all?
I mean, it is in the contract that if we request it, that they have to do an annual tour of their property. We have not organized that. So it would, I mean, technically, if we request it, they have to allow it, but we haven't really made them do it in the recent past. But that could be something that we can bring back.
Well, it came up, as Matthew said, as he was reviewing the property, some of the owners preferred to be outside and not have the entrance. And I think, since we haven't done it in the past, having a soft beginning and understanding that we've been in COVID, for a couple of years, I think was a wise thing to do, but I would think maybe the next time you would go inside and maybe some of them would begin to feel more comfortable about if there was some time where there was an interest in having a walk or a special event where you celebrated certain types of houses, you know, they might elect to be part of that, or they might not. Some people are very maybe uncomfortable because it's their residence. I just wondered if you had any feedback on that. So but
Yeah,
I know we haven't asked.
during the chats with people, it was more focused on the maintenance plan and activities they needed to do than them opening it up to the public.
Mhm.
And on your note, we weren't insisting on going inside people's properties, especially for consistency between everybody's. Some
No,
of
I
them were
think that
really
was-
cool to see the inside, but
Are there any other questions from the commissioners? Juan has his hand. I'm sorry. Juan, there you are.
Physical and I guess digital hand up. Thank you. Hey, very, very good work. I think I was gonna say one of the newer ones, but I think I'm the newest commissioner, so I really appreciate this survey. It's super interesting and it's really nice walking around our community. And I mean, I recognize some of those houses from my walks, and thank you to your department that, you know, have preserved these properties and made our community a lot more beautiful than it already is. We're lucky because of nature, and then we're also lucky because of this. I just have a question, because you talked about property owners possibly losing the Mills Act status in their property, and you talked about them being assessed a 12.5% of the value when that happens. I guess I have a couple of questions related to that. So is it a one-time fee, or is it, you know, based on the years that they benefit from the Mills Act and they didn't respond? So that's one question. And then I guess I'm gonna add another question that I just thought of. What's the procedure to do that? Do you enforce it? Is the county involved? Is it code enforcement? Is it a trial or administrative procedure? And then the last question I have related to those is, in recent memory, in the last 6 to 12 months, has the city had to do that to any property owner?
so no property that's entered the Mills Act program has been ejected from the program to date. So in terms of solidifying that process and procedure, it is for the most part codified within our section, but like we have yet to see it in action.
Yeah, we haven't ever canceled the Millsack contract yet, so I wouldn't be able to answer your question about what kind of procedure it would take, but it would definitely involve the city and the property owner, and then the county assessor would have to reassess the property tax.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's a good thing, especially seeing the quality of the property surveyed in this presentation. And I don't know if you'll know, but is it, your answer could be, well, we haven't had to do it, so I don't know, but do you know if it's like a one-time 12.5% assessment, or is it per year?
It's a one-time penalty.
Okay. And I mean, it's a big penalty, especially for any property in the peninsula, 12.5% of any property here, but I was just curious. Okay, thank you. Thank you, seriously. Thank you very much for the work. And thank you very much for, like I said, making our community pretty. Thanks.
Thank you for your positive comments, Juan, and also, I think we all share those. Carol.
Can you tell me what's going to happen with these 33 properties that haven't completed the majority of their tasks? I mean, how are you going to handle them? Are you just going to ask them nicely to do it? I mean, are you going to give them some kind of a deadline to complete a certain number of tasks, or what is the procedure?
That is an excellent question. First is what we're doing right now, which is the reminder, and then next year is looking for progress. If there has been no progress, we've been taking it step by step, I suppose, but are open to suggestions as well as to move forward.
I think Matthew, in his report, he said that most tasks have been accomplished, and I think he said maybe it was more like one or two were missing from some, most properties, and then he also said there are some that have a lot more to do.
Yeah, well, there were 33 properties that didn't have a majority of their tasks completed.
There were
77 that did, or wait,
That's
77%. So maybe it was 33%.
here, I can pull up
Yeah.
the
23.
23
Okay,
were
so
100%.
33%, which is
Yeah.
23 houses.
Yeah.
Okay.
the 77% had completed just about everything except for maybe a paint job or one minor task. 43 out of the 56 had been good. So the outstanding 13 or so had some larger items. Perhaps they needed to re-roof and they haven't yet, or
A variety of,
a variety of
Okay.
bigger tasks that should have been done.
well, I think there's good momentum with this in terms of the property owners following through for the most part. I think with the tensions of COVID the last couple of years, I'm sure some things have fallen through the cracks a little. I think a soft start on this was a good way to bring it back into focus for them and let them know, in a sense, having the reduction in property tax meant the public didn't receive the benefit of their tax dollars. So the benefit is to the public that they get to enjoy these beautiful homes, where they're just driving down the street, and the homes give a character and a historical context to the community. So I think there's an enjoyment there. And I think it would be nice if, and it seems like with all the things you have to do, to add another thing, or maybe another group could take this on in a way to give property owners a chance through historic home tour concept they could choose to be a part of it, and that could be fairly soft also in doing it or not doing it. I've been a docent a couple years in Carmel. Kathy Cullum actually works in the office of the Carmel Historic Heritage Society, and they have open houses, and it's something that property owners can choose to do, and it gives value to a house to be seen by the public as something really special. They have a remarkable really a remarkable history of not having any problems with this. Nothing taken, no accidents, no, so they don't, so it's gone well for them. Some property owners might see that as an advantage to the house to be known for some special thing that the house has. And some property owners may still not choose to participate. But I'm just thinking, that would give them a way to do it in a soft way that's kind of protected and they don't have to come up with something on their own. And it could be by choice, that could be something that would, some people might want to do it. And I think if they wanted to, that would be very nice. Forcing people to do it would be difficult, but I think they still have to remember they have been able to benefit from this because, they've been able to maintain their homes by this benefit of not paying their full taxes. So I think it's been a wonderful thing for the community. I think it's been good for the property owner. And I really appreciate our staff work in accomplishing this mission because it allows us to see the total project in one report, which has, been piecemeal, one at a time for us over the years that I've been on the commission. And do we have any other questions? Yeah.
I have,
Yeah, Carol.
not really a question, but some, comments. I think this is fantastic. I actually was on the commission
Mhm.
back when it started. And several times we've said, well, how do we know? How do we know? Now we know. And I just briefly went through this and it looks like the properties that are not compliant, most of them are nearly compliant. We're talking 80-some%, 90-some%. So that's, I think, huge considering we didn't really know up until now. Not every city has Mills Act. I did watched a CPF thing on Mills Act, and it's wonderful that our city, which used to be known for its historic preservation programs, still maintains that. And this, you did a great job, Matthew. I'm really impressed with this. Also, the library used to do historic homes tours in October, and then it morphed into like artist, so less history, more art. And when people opened their homes, it wasn't the whole home. Sometimes it was just the living room, kitchen, down the hall where the bedrooms were, and all the crap probably was stuff behind closed doors. But it didn't mean that people had needed to open up everything in their house. But it was definitely something that the library took on as part of
I enjoyed those
History
tours
Month.
too.
So maybe at some point we can get that back. But kudos to
Yeah. Thank
to
you.
all of you.
I see a hand from Commissioner Humbar.
Oh, good. Lori.
Hi. My question is, do homes that get the Mills Act have to be historic interiors? Because seems like sometimes homes get remodeled inside, which then they're no longer historic on the inside. And how would we account for that, or do we?
That is a
That is, are you asking Matthew? Should I take
Yeah.
Matthew?
Yeah.
Okay.
that's a great question. A number of the Mills Act properties, I could probably find the percentage after doing that inspection, but many of them have a portion of the interior that is considered historic and is part of their maintenance plan and they need to maintain. For instance, I can think of, not gonna remember the address, but one home, the tile work in the bathroom was an Art Deco 1920s, 1930s preserved, a beautiful bathroom that is considered a historic aspect of the property. But But I'd say on the whole, it was more common for it to be the exterior of the home or the design of the home. And what happened on the inside, I was about to say it doesn't really matter, but in the context of the maintenance plan, there was no reason to go inside. And I'd say that was more common than probably about 50, gonna throw out a number, 50%-ish. There was some aspect of the interior that was important and the other 50, not so much. Whether it, and it, for a number of the maintenance plans, it might say refinish the hardwood floors, but then if you look at the historic report, the hardwood floors were never mentioned as being a significant historic aspect of the home. It just ended up on their maintenance plan. So it's probably even less than that, that the interior was considered a historic aspect of the home. The carriage house for the Perry house with that beautiful dome ceiling, that is part of the historic integrity. It really varied on a case by case basis, but for the most part, the interiors were not considered quote unquote the historic part.
Did that answer your question, Lori? I think some
Yeah, I just like,
houses, if the
so
kitchen is not
oh.
featured in the plan, then people have remodeled a kitchen and have done different things and it does, and that's all right.
right, but what I'm thinking is if there's no historic features on the inside of a house, why would a person want to have a tour of it? So maybe we should,
And that's a good question. So I don't think every house fits that exactly. It could be part of the tour could be walking around and acknowledging the outside features, it would be house by house.
right,
And I think the property owner, it's just that some of them might want to do that. It is a sense of value and some of them might not, want to do it in that way. So I think that's a good way to look at it. What are the features of the house that made the commission during those years deem it Mills Act, and then focus on that part. Yeah, Carol.
Doesn't have to be an H1 or H2. Normally, it doesn't have to work inside.
Mhm.
We're looking at the outside. But if they, no, I'm sorry. Thank you. Normally for an H1 or H2 building, we're looking at the exteriors of the building to deem them H1 or H2. But to keep up a building, which is what the Mills Act it wants us to do, maybe it's not finishing the floors, but it's certainly maintaining the plumbing and other things that maybe it's like good bones. So you have to take that into consideration. So, I don't think we'd ever want all 60 buildings on a house tour, and we just want them to be available. And I don't think the city, being Monterey, they're not going to force somebody to open their house.
But there could be opportunities.
But it would be, I some of the places we've toured over the years, I'd love to get into again.
Yeah.
But yeah, because there are some really cool houses in Monterey. And I think having some sort of a historic homes tour would enhance the knowledge of history in Monterey, that it's just such a wonderful city to walk around, and Juan said it on your walk, you walk around and go, oh, that's a really cool house, so anyway.
Thanks. Any other commissioner?
I just want to add to Carol's comments that I think it's a good way to also advertise the Mills Act and to try to continue to preserve some of these buildings that may not otherwise be preserved. So I think that's a good way to doing tours like that would be excellent.
Educate people.
Yeah, and I just want to agree with all the commissioners and commend you on the report. It was very thorough and very educational.
Yeah, it's a huge step forward for us as a community. Is there anyone else that wants to? We're really fortunate to have somebody in our audience who actually has a home that was just
Yes.
presented. And so if there aren't any other comments, let's go to the public comments and invite Nancy to join us. Introduce yourself and your home.
I wasn't expecting to speak here, but
Oh, it's nice.
I'm Nancy Soule and my husband and I own the house at 504 Larkin. You made a mistake on the street number on your slide, but that's
But
okay.
you had it
Hopefully
in
you
the slide.
reflect it. It was one of those you saw there.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, some of the things you're talking about are issues that I hear a lot. I'm on the board of Old Town Neighborhood Association. And I'm not sure if you are aware, but during COVID, I and another Old Town member, Phyllis Bussey, put together a tour that is posted on our website, oldtownmonterey.org. And that's open to the public. It's a public website. And it doesn't require, any credentials to look at what's in that website. And that tour is a walking tour. It's interactive. If you see a plaque, you could go to the street address and you could start your tour there. There's 30 homes on it. And many of us have we all have an outside picture on our homes in this thing. And some of them have more pictures because we researched all the Mills Act homes that Geraldine had from a list. And we also included any state historical homes that were on the state designation and then the National Register. So we have some homes that I'd been dying to find the historical background to. And we asked the owners, we got permission. We did it by default. We gave a letter in writing asking if they had 30 days to tell us if they didn't want to be on our walking tour. But it is an outside tour. And it does tell you, or anybody who's on site to that tour, that they should not be going inside the gate or off the sidewalk. It's a sidewalk tour. And my husband and I, we did get the Mills Act as Matthew has in his report. And Kent Seavey did our historical report, as he did many of them that are in your Mills Act. He didn't even go upstairs. So he only talked about the exterior. And he explained to us that the former wing that was off and added later than the house was originally built, that we could scrape it and put a new kitchen wing, which we did. So we had to alter a lot of the interior pathways and the way we use the rooms. We took a large formal dining room and made it a master bedroom and used the old kitchen, made it our bedroom, master bedroom suite. So things are altered. They aren't going to look historical in that manner. But as I think Matthew could attest, we brought him in and we've tried to keep the flavor of historical. We've kept the wainscoting, although it's been had to be all taken down. We had to strengthen walls and so forth. It's all been refurbished and reinstalled. All the trims, windows are reinstalled, but it's a difficult process. And this is what I hear from the public when I've asked people. I said, hey, did you know you could buy a historical home and you might be able to get Mills Act? There's the historical reports, and that was $2,000 if you don't know that. There is compliance with all the materials that you want. It's quite extensive. But Kent Seavey, when he did the report, and I presume you're aware of who he is, he's a historian. He said they only care about the exterior. So he required a window at the top gable that used to be an octagon to be redone. And he let us do it in a shape similar to what an old vent would be, but it's an actual window. And it had to have the little bars like a vent would be, but it's a functioning window now. And it replaced one that was not only of a shape that would never have been there, but it was also installed on the floor. So it had a danger for, the possibility that you didn't have the right clearance from the floor. And so anyway, I just wanted you to be aware that the public from the perspective of a homeowner who's gone through your process, we were told that you were not going inside, that we could make changes. We don't have hanging chandeliers anymore. It was non-functional. My husband hit his head on it. He's fairly tall, but it's the way it was. We had to change the use of the rooms, and so chandeliers were sold. Things that were on the exterior. There was one window that we were allowed to change a little bit, but we had to keep the old one and we have it preserved. But it's a real, you do put the owners through a lot, and it does cost a lot more for the materials. I just think you need to be consistent, and I think you need, and I hope that you would make a policy that being on the tour that is a walking tour of Old Town, historical homes, that has all the history there, it's got pictures, it's interactive, that is a good way to have a tour. Rather than telling a homeowner that if you're getting Mills Act, you have to go inside the home. My husband himself, we like having people into our home, but he's concerned about just having it open to the public. He's concerned because we have fully utilized every room. We have our garages, which have hardly any more room than what is needed for garage type equipment, and our 2 cars. We don't have a place to secure our valuables in a offsite place. He's concerned. Why? What about everything we've got? You have to have it open. I mean, who's going to be responsible for that? I know, Geraldine, you said you didn't find examples of theft or anything, but when I talk to people about maybe getting a historical home and refurbishing it, that's their number one thing. I don't want people in my home. So if you could clarify and say, if you're willing to have your house on and add it to the historical home tour, but of course our tour is just Old Town. You might have to have other people do
That's
something
really-
similar.
This is just this neighborhood, the Old Town neighborhood, and it would be Spaghetti Hill. It was the old term primarily, and it lends itself to a walking tour, and there was interest in doing it. People and it worked out great. So we have talked about this tour before, because I mentioned it when you accomplished it here. I
Oh.
want to tell them, and so Nancy really took this idea, and then the neighborhood association supported it, and she had a good partner in doing it, and it's outstanding. So that's when the focus is on the outside of the property, giving a little background and looking at the outside of the property does tell you, a little more about the history of the people who may have built it, who built it, what maybe prominent people lived in it, as well as the structural details that are visible. And perhaps other neighborhoods would like to know more about it. So it's nice to feature it in this discussion so that people can consider that for their own neighborhoods. Thank you for mentioning that.
And perhaps the city could ask people if they would put together a history with some photos and have it on a city site where they wouldn't have to get it, because getting a neighborhood to say, oh yeah, I'm going to take on this huge project, that's probably, Phyllis and I did it for love, and also it would happen to be COVID. There wasn't much going on in our lives at the time, like you all know. But I think
there are
ask-
ways for people to participate in it. It doesn't have to be just one way. There may be some people that wouldn't mind it because it would be a feather in the cap of the homeowner to have their home on a tour. And I just know Carmel does it, and it seems to go well there. But mandating something I don't think would work. And no, we haven't ever done it. And I want to make that clear. There are no plans to do it. So it's just the idea of giving back something to the public because the money was spent
Sure.
on helping to preserve the homes that the homeowners enjoy.
So maybe the city site could have a list of some of the homes or something that because they have a site. I did want to address one thing else if I could. And that is your requirement, Matthew, over the next year, you would like to see receipts. And I know you kind of mentioned that, but I'm trying to think of the very big difficulty we would have. For instance, our remodel was quite extensive. We really pretty much had to gut it out for a lot of engineering, structural beams and things that had to go. We had a sagging roof when we bought it. I mean, there was a ton of stuff that had to be done. And the bills didn't come out where it said, oh, this is what we spent for the chimney. This is what we spent for the front wall. I mean, that's plumbing. It might go over 6 months, a little here, a little of this, a little of that. My husband could probably put together a spreadsheet showing that, but we didn't have, because we didn't declare it for taxes because it wasn't a write-off. We didn't do spreadsheets like we normally do on rental properties, except for the back building, but the back building isn't historical. So it's not part of the discussion.
Yeah, I remember our discussion near the end about you had asked if we were going to ask for receipts or anything like that, and it was the next day or so where I was chatting with Fernanda about, well, when it comes to that, to what extent are we going to require from people, or we're going to ask as much as they have. I'm sure when it comes to everybody's filings, they file in different ways.
Wouldn't maybe documenting the various, like for instance, I know there was a hearing about the chimney, for instance. So couldn't you take a picture of the chimney and say it's done rather than the receipt? Because I mean, it was over so many, every billing that we had, and we had most of it through the contractor, but it would be over a variety of subjects and hours and billing. It didn't specify exactly what they were working on that day. I don't know how to put it. I don't know how we could possibly differentiate how much that specific thing would have cost.
That is fair.
Anyway, that was just my concern on that.
I really appreciate the fact that you came today,
Oh, sure.
because I think it's
Interesting.
good to consider the perspective of the homeowner.
Yeah.
You know, and you've hit several areas that possibly other homeowners also can identify with. So thank you for coming and
Sure.
representing the homeowners.
Thanks for telling me about it, Geraldine. And thank you all for your work on this. Bye.
So the next is that I guess that's pretty much, do we make a motion to accept the report, or
It's not
we just
necessary.
enjoy it?
It was just an informational report for you to receive.
Okay, I noticed the next topic is consider providing input on updates to the Mills Act public handout. And can you tell us a little more about what you had in mind there?
Sure. So because this was our first year on doing the Millsack monitoring, we came across a bunch of things that were inconsistent. Like Matthew mentioned, the maintenance schedules from the early 2000s look a lot different than our most recent maintenance schedules. And so we just wanted to bring to you the Millsack handout, because, you know, now that this inspection report is fresh in your mind, we wanted to see if you had any suggestions for modifying the handout to make it, maybe to make the requirements more clear for homeowners, and also to maybe standardize some of the submittals that they need to submit when they apply for a Millsack. And we've made some suggestions for you, but we wanted
That's
your input as well.
in page 88, 89, after all of the data sheets in our handout, there's the recommendation in terms of the updates. So would you like to tell us a little more about that?
Sure. And did you have a question?
I had a comment, a couple of comments on this. I mean, it's a very nice handout. Couple of things. I think that the plaque should be required. It says
Those may be.
recipients may be required to install a plaque. I think that it should be shall be required. In fact, if there's a way you could go back, you know, for people who weren't required to have a plaque, I think even retroactively, we should require the plaque.
Mhm.
Um, and then the other thing is, I think there should be a penalty for non-compliance short of the 12.5%, because that's a huge, you know, you cancel the Mills Act contract and charge them 12.5%. I mean, that's a huge amount of money, but if there's a way to have some kind of an intermediate penalty if people don't do anything, I mean, the example I keep using is over in New Monterey. I mean, certainly there were mitigating circumstances here, but it was 1.5 years before the historic preservation report was even done. Now, regardless of COVID or fires or anything else, you can do your historic preservation report early on. I mean, there was 1.5 years where they were collecting the tax advantage and not spending any money at all. So I think that if there's, and I don't know how would be the best way to do this, but some kind of an intermediate penalty for non-compliance.
So
So
that,
did-
that would require, our city attorney's office to review that because currently we don't have a way of, levying a penalty for non-compliance. And so that may require city council approval as well. I'm not entirely sure, but it is a city attorney provided form. That it's a standard Mills Act contract form.
I mean, that's fine, but I think it's important that we have something like that in place. I mean, and maybe it'll take some time. Maybe we need to set up a subcommittee to review this. I mean, but I do think it's something that we should pursue.
So
I want to take a step back. Did you, maybe I should have given you time to say your recommendations first and then had, if the office has any recommendations.
Matthew does have a presentation
have-
to show.
Okay, good. So let's do that.
no
And
worries
then
at all.
we'll move with I think we're a little out of order.
I'll try and make this short and sweet. And I will share my screen. This is the handout overview checklist updates presentation for the Mills Act contract. A little bit of background, this public handout is available for members of the public to find what is necessary for the application, and the information here is outdated and requires some updates. To access it, you can go to the planning page, and the arrow is supposed to be on top of that image, but the arrow points to the first one, which is how to apply for a planning permit. If you go down to planning permits, there's a little drop down. It says Mills Act. If you click on that, it leads you to the handout. Also, we have these printed out in our office right over there. The handout covers the introduction and purpose of the Mills Act. It covers the term of the contract, that it's a 10-year duration, what the cancellation risks are. It also includes the contract requirements, that it is historically significant and requires a maintenance plan. It requires what findings must be made by city council, that it would designate the H designation on the property, and that the contract will maintain the resource. It goes over the process, which is one of the more complicated processes for an application in the city, going from planning to PC and planning commission, or to HPC and planning commission, to city council, and then the county assessor. And at the end of the handout is the submittal checklist itself of all the things they need to include. I have a zoomed out image here of some of the updates that were made. This was printed and is, I think, in the handouts that you guys have been looking at. And I'm going to zoom in on a few items in particular. One, a clarification that the Planning Commission reviews the application, documentation, staff report, and HPC. Here's recommendation. to recommend approval or denial of the request to city council, and that it's directly from HPC to city council and not necessarily to planning commission.
Where is that?
This is, you're in the
Okay.
right place.
So it's,
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
It's in the
contract.
process.
Okay, I see. It's kind of highlighted in our copy. Thank
Correct.
you. Got it.
Also on the next page, there's a flow chart. And in that flow chart, it initially said that the applicant mails the contract to the county, but it's actually the city who mails the contract to the State Office of Historic Preservation.
Oh, yeah.
There were some updates for the project application form. Since we no longer do paper submittals, we're doing exclusively electronic submittals these days. If somebody walks in with a paper application, we end up scanning it. But this directs people to the correct project application form. Some edits were made to the other portions of the checklist, the legal description, maintenance plan, photos, that digital and hard copies. It's no longer hard copies, it's digital headed our way. We've also requested that a copy of the deed be included in the application. There's a slight snafu recently with one of our projects where the property owner's name didn't match up with the county. So having that name clarified is really important to get things codified with the county. Also, for photos, that they should show all elevations of the structure, and especially after doing the maintenance plans where we were looking for original photos of what the property used to look like and what things have been improved, it would be extremely useful to have a photo of a building when it's going through our process. Then there were some updates to the maintenance plan, which is on the last sheet of the handout. We didn't originally ask for an email address, and since there's been different homeowners over time and the telephone number may be out of date, trying to also get another way to contact people, which is the email addresses, and especially having something in writing is super useful. So ask for an email address. And then lastly, an update to the maintenance plan itself to try and differentiate between near-term tasks and long-term maintenance tasks. There's as I said earlier, with these maintenance inspections, there was a chunk of stuff that might have been done 15 years ago, and it's just nice to know what they're working on now. With that, if there's any additional comments, like
Yeah,
Carol had noted.
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
And I'm tagging on to Carol's comment about the plaque. You know, at some point, there's this renewal. And certainly for another 10-year contract. So at that time, that could be part of the renewal, that the plaque be looked at. So you can't go back and add it to the original thing if it wasn't there, but it could be in the renewal, isn't that? So I think ending up with the concept that each of these houses should eventually have a plaque is something that I think we should support. And the fact that it was stated May, or what did you notice that it said that they may have a plaque or something like that? Oh, may be required to install a plaque. That's confusing. Some people might read it as you have the word required, they may focus on that, and some people may focus on may and decide it's not required at all, and they don't ever have to do
Just
it.
change it to shall.
Yeah, I think going forward, I think that should be one of the things that should be included, and it for renewals. It should be included, and that would be a way of, picking that up if it wasn't clear to the property owner at the beginning.
I have a question too about the plaque. Is it stated anywhere for the property owner that the plaque should be visible to the public, like if they have a wall?
Yes.
Or does it have to, because there's one house I dying to read it. It was built by Michael Murphy, who did Carmel Heritage's Museum and on Watson Street, and it's way upstairs on the house by the front door, you know, not down where the public could see it. And I've heard it's, well, I talked to the people who live there now, and educators lived there and had regular meetings there. And which I'm a former educator and you are. So I find that very interesting. I'd love to read it. So is there anything, Matthew, that the property owners, if, when they do display the plaque, that it goes on the house or on the, I guess I hate to say on the street, but the sidewalk area?
I'd have to double check the language that shows up in our plans, which I could probably pull up during this meeting. From memory, it has to be publicly visible.
Oh, it does.
Um,
Oh,
but I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna look it up during this just to double check. But that was relatively common. There's a number of plaques that are on the home, and then they have
Right.
fence out front,
Yeah,
and
I've
then you can
noticed
read it from
that.
the street.
So the owner has to apply through us to install the plaque because we have to check the language to make sure it's historically accurate.
well, good.
So when they do that, we also review the location of the plaque.
Oh,
So we make
okay.
sure that it's visible from the right of way.
Okay.
That one, the one you just mentioned about Watson Street, I don't know how long ago that was installed, but I know that recently we've been reviewing each single one of them and reviewing the location as well.
That's good.
Because Michael Murphy built over 300 homes in Carmel. I know he built at least 4 in Monterey. And so that was just an accident on a walk that I found out from a neighbor that was a Murphy, which I was very excited, of course. So, and then the veranda adobe that's on the market, one of those outbuildings, Michael Murphy built too, which I didn't know till we had the tour of that adobe.
Are you looking for us to make a motion to,
I have a question.
okay, yeah, I'm not saying we're ready
Okay.
to do it.
Thought I also
mean-
saw Commissioner Rodriguez with his hands up, I think.
Yeah, I haven't. That's good.
Sorry. I stood up and stretched a little bit. I just wanted to say with the additions of my colleagues, I like that addition of the shall. Obviously, you're the experts in the language on the form, and I'm one of them. I'm a government employee. Sometimes we forget and we talk governmentese. Just a suggestion, before you finalize that form, it might be a good idea to maybe run it by a couple of participants that are already in the program and see if the handout makes sense to them, and maybe there could be ways to improve it. Maybe there's a miscommunication, maybe between the expectations that they had and what the original handout told them. So just a suggestion, if you can, and if you haven't done already, it might be a good idea to get a participant to review the form for you too.
Do you want to respond to his?
That I think that's a great idea, and especially since we have contact with a number of these individuals, and especially those that have been either unaware of items or unclear on things, or who participate. I don't think it's a bad idea.
That way, everybody has clear expectations, right? Whether it's a plaque or whatever it is, and whether you need to have access whenever you need it, whatever it is. But I mean, it might work out. You have a very dedicated one in the public right now. I don't know if you can. We can take advantage of you to take a look at it too. But anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
I noticed as you were flashing through some of those contractual sheets, looking for something, I saw a line that said shall instead of may in terms of the be open to the public on a tour. So in some of the forms, it does say shall instead of may, and some say may. So So that there, right there, shall agree. You see that under tours? Mhm. And I don't know what year this was put on there. And there is the owner shall install and maintain a bronze plaque.
Mhm.
So in some of the contracts,
Yeah.
that's the language that the owners were comfortable signing
Mhm.
in order to have a Mills Act. Yet our description says may. So
We'll change
they
it to
certainly
shall.
should match.
Yeah, the
Yep.
handout will definitely change for
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm. I think that's important. And so, are you looking for a motion that says that,
I have a
Not right,
question.
oh,
not
okay.
yet,
Not
we're,
right now, we're just
Mhm.
taking in information at this meeting and
That's-
we'll
that's
come
what I
back
was
and with
wondering.
a finalized version for you to approve.
perfect. Yeah, that's what, so we're providing input. Is there anyone else?
Yeah,
that-
I have a question. On the flow chart, I'm a little confused where it says appeal and it's crossed out and there's an arrow from over to that and then it goes back to under the planning commission. I don't quite understand what that means.
So our city code says that only actions that become final can be appealed.
Okay,
So since the HPC and the PC only make recommendations to the city council, those actions are not allowed to be appealed.
so then you just cross out that whole thing?
We
Okay,
crossed out the appeal box and arrows.
okay, all right, that makes sense then.
On the screen is the way it looks now without the
Okay.
appeal.
Excellent, all right,
Okay.
that makes sense. And I think Lori had a question too.
Yes, want to get back into the open house thing. And I really think it would be important to keep the open house like into the May or, or not even required at all, because a lot of times there's no value into going into someone's house. And why would we want someone to hesitate to get the Mills Act and perform all the required maintenance that comes with it because they might have to have people come into their house? Because it just, there probably is very little original stuff in an old house. I mean, especially in the kinds of houses that are on our list of houses, because, a lot of times they are not fancy and, nothing really of value, and people have gone in there and remodeled them over the years. And so I just wouldn't want someone to feel uncomfortable that they had to have an open house.
Yeah,
Because more of the value is in keeping the structure. And if someone was really proud of their inside of their house and they had kept it all original, they'd probably want to show it off.
Mhm.
Anyway, that's my concern.
Carol, maybe you could just require, an exterior walk around. Because
Mhm.
that's what we're concerned about, and you can't see, obviously you can't see the whole house from the street. So if you could, maybe if people are uncomfortable with people going into the house, they would be okay with people walking around the exterior.
A
Yeah.
tour
Yeah.
could mean that.
Yeah.
Maybe required to have a tour, but then the definition of tour would be if the tour would be make visible more the things that are part of the contract. And in most cases, they're exterior.
Mhm.
It's primarily exterior. So if you said shall be required for a tour, if the things are exterior, then it's a walk around.
Mhm.
And for some owners that have an especially unique interior, that's something different. I think that might work for most people.
Yeah, I'd also like to note on the contract that it says property and not interior.
Mhm.
So being allowed on somebody's property, in some cases, I can see why that would be reasonable because a number of them either have large walls around them or hedges that have grown up or gated systems that go into them. I'm not arguing for one way or the other, but more that I could see why if it is a historically preserved building for the public, being able to see it once a year sometimes takes you going on the other side of the fence, which technically is their property. I could see it both ways.
Lori, does that make sense to you that if they're specifically talking about the outside in the contract, that it's exterior only, and if the house has some, and there are very few that seem to have interior features that are part of the contract, then those might be subject to some view of that feature on the inside. Does that seem?
I think if during negotiations for the Mills Act and they're, using interior maintenance or whatever as part of their Mills Act, that maybe, there could be some negotiation that during this tour that people could be allowed to go in and see what the Mills Act has paid for as far as restoration of historic features. That's a maybe. I don't know. It might be too complicated.
But it's something that at least we're talking about, so that primarily it's outside features, and primarily a tour could be around the outside.
Yeah,
from the property.
especially since that's, mostly what people need to do is structural, which doesn't show, rewiring, which, it's nothing, replumbing, that's nothing. If they had some beautiful original hardwood floors that were historic, that could be something. If they kept their original cabinets, that could be something. So I just think I think it should be negotiated, really.
Yeah, depending on the house.
As far as plaques go, is there like a standard plaque that they have to get, or how is that chosen?
But
I'm-
that-
I'm
that-
sorry to interrupt. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I need to leave. I just wanted to make everybody aware. There's no vote, right? You don't need me for quorum or anything?
Well, there's no boat.
No.
Okay, I'm so sorry, and happy holidays, everybody, if I don't see you.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Okay,
So that's why we make the owners apply through us,
Mhm.
because we do have a standard template and material that we want the plaque to be the same for everyone. It's like
Okay.
that bronze background with the gold lettering. And there's a city logo too at the top.
And what is the plaque supposed to say? Like the date of construction, or?
Yeah, usually it has the date of construction, the architect, if there was one, and a brief history of the house, or the homeowners, if the original owners, if they were important to the area, things like that.
Like a mayor or something.
the high points of the criteria for the house.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Let's move to Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the tour. I think the way it's worded is fine. It says to make may be asked to make the historic resource open to the public, which is very loose. So they may be asked, and it's the resource, which is step behind the hedge, or maybe have it on the walking tour. There are other people who would love to have the interiors open, and God love them, because I love to go inside.
Yeah, yeah,
There were some people that were very excited to try and
Yes.
yeah.
take a look at this floor.
I think it could
And
be a
and
good
usually
thing.
they have, I don't know how they do it in Carmel, but there were a lot of volunteers in each room to
Mhm.
make sure that nobody walked off with the.
That's right.
We have dozens.
And the homeowners volunteer. There's nothing forced about it. They
Oh, no.
want to do
It's
it.
getting harder though, and I must tell you, Carol, the Bach Festival, prior to the pandemic, used to have a house tour. And Pacific Grove did. And I was talking to the organizer of Pacific Grove's tour recently, and she said, Kathy, it is getting so hard to have people open up their homes. So many people don't want them in. They're afraid of burglary or, different things like that, which we understand. So it's just like we all have different personalities. And as you said, some people want, I mean, the one house we just had, they were on 8 years ago, built by a Russian builder who only built 4 homes in Carmel and went bankrupt, went back to Russia. But their home, she wanted them to go up the whole turret to the top. In fact, Geraldine was a docent at that home. And he is totally into the antique autos and all. He wanted people to go in the den to see the posters of all these gorgeous old posters he has. So you never know, I mean, that was kind of an exception. There were some areas that were roped off in homes too, like you said, that they didn't want them looking at a couple of bedrooms or something like that.
I think for our purposes, however, you guys want to word it that's open enough, and really the task will be to get someone like the library.
That's what I was going to say.
To host.
I'm thinking of talking to the new
sponsor it,
director
so,
about it.
This is just
Yeah.
setting it up,
Yeah.
so.
Well, this is
It's a good
back again
fundraiser.
in some summary, unless there's somebody that's a critical point. We're really excited that this report came to us. It's like a Christmas present, and we're really happy about it. And
Good
thanks
timing.
for all your work, Matthew, and thanks for the allocation of time that the city gave you to do this, because I'm sure it was very time consuming, and it was I think it was a good outreach for you to have contact with the homeowners and let them know that we care about it and we're in touch with them and start that connection. And so just kudos to everybody involved. Thank you very much.
Thank
So,
you.
so
Yeah,
since it's informational, we can close this, or do you have anything else you want to add?
just a final note on that, it was billed to me originally as an hour or two per week, but it was not. After you reach out to people and then take a look at the file and then go do the site visit and come back and you upload the photos and you put the little blurb in there, it's more than an hour or two a week.
I imagine, and we look forward to getting the final proposal of the changed language when you get ready for that. So what a nice thing this was. So there are no motions, and then we just kind of go to our closing comments, which are the commissioner and the staff sharing what's coming up, things that have happened. I have one thing. Carol and I attended an architectural review commission meeting because Carol brought up that historic Anthony home was all of a sudden had storyboards up and it looked attached to the house, and we were concerned about it, and so we attended the meeting, and we really appreciated the fact that the architectural review listened to us and seemed to understand that, and we're just trying to understand, and maybe everybody should. There's a little crossover in what we're doing, and sometimes historic houses, the staff decides whether they go directly to architectural review and bypass us because they're potentially historic, they haven't gone through the process, because as we know, when they did the drive-by tour, they identified houses that haven't come up in our agendas for any kind of additional review. They've been held by the same owners, nothing's been changed. It's just gone along in time. And so sometimes they go to architectural review. My concern was that architectural, and in talking to them, they have no training on the kinds of things that we're supposed to have training on. So members of the architectural review board said, well, can they see a project on their agenda and not address it and say, well, maybe it should go to historic preservation? And it turns out they can't do that. That's not in their purview. So, I'm wondering if perhaps if they're going to do it, if they should have some training for it, or if we can figure out just which projects go where and why. Maybe a little more clarification of that would also be helpful, because I think it's confusing, at least for them to receive a project and not know the criteria that we keep working on to be more consistent and apply it. But for them, it isn't part of their training. I think that would be a little confusing. And then I think sometimes the public might say, well, maybe let's just take the fast track and go through architectural and miss, the historic preservation part of it. Carol?
Anyway, this particular house is a 1926 J.C. Anthony. It has not been touched in almost 100 years, and it's on a neighborhood reconnaissance survey listed as particularly significant. And they put up these story poles, but the point is, they can go directly to ARC as long as they hire an historian who says that whatever they're proposing to do complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards. But Geraldine and I are thinking that it would be better, especially for a property that's on the neighborhood survey, especially a property that's listed as particularly significant, that those should, I mean, just because they don't have a current Mills Act contract doesn't mean that they should be bypassing HPC. So I request that we have as a future agenda item discussion on this topic. And I understand that this would require changing a city ordinance, but I do think it's worth doing. We've also talked to people on ARC who are in favor of this type of a change.
Well, we can bring it back as a clarification because we could point to the city code section that requires ARC versus HPC. So that's clear for everyone.
It should be
But I would,
clear.
oh, excuse me, but I would like to specifically find out if we wanted to pursue changing this city ordinance, how we would do that.
That would be a letter to our community development director so that then she can take it up with our city manager. And
Community Development Director?
yes,
But could we-
I don't even understand the title of that position. Community Development Director.
yes, the community development director, Kim Cole.
Oh, that's her title.
Yes.
Okay.
She
you.
would then take it to our city manager for his review and to see where it would fit within our work program.
Okay, but could we agendize considering writing such a letter to the community development director?
Sure.
I mean, if everybody agrees.
I'm a little confused why this house, if it was potentially historic, didn't come to us
Right.
That's,
for a
That's the whole
designation,
point.
got it.
Yeah.
thumbs up or thumbs down anyway.
The city code does not require that a potentially historic house be reviewed by the HPC for any structural additions or changes.
then how do you decide which houses come to us and which houses go to architectural review?
The ones that go to architectural review are the ones that have not been designated, meaning that they haven't been zoned historic.
And so something like this house, 1926, no changes, an Anthony House, which of course we generally do consider those very historic, hitting on nearly 100 years old, wouldn't trigger historic preservation in your mind.
It's not in my mind, it's in the city code. It says clearly that only historically designated, so historically zoned properties, go to HPC review for any change.
Sometimes we have both motions to declare them historic and to move on with other motions relating to that.
Could
Some
the-
of
the-
them,
Yeah, when they put up the storyboards and when they put an addition, they are still required to do it within the historic preservation, the National Register standards and all of that. Is that
Yes,
correct?
they are required to follow the Secretary of the Interior standards still.
but in this case, and actually it hasn't come. It's planning to go to architectural review. They didn't have a meeting this month. But what I understood was that the project were going to be in outbuildings like a small, another dwelling or something like that in the yard. But the alarming part was that the storyboards were attached to the main structure. So that was not what we understood should be happening. And to put storyboards before the architectural committee even reviewed it should not have happened either. So I think they were out of line. Somebody didn't inform them that they shouldn't do that. That isn't permitted. Isn't that true?
So story polls are required for any project that is going to ARC, so that it raises public awareness that something might show up there. It is required that they're supposed to put the story polls on. They definitely put them up too early. They submitted the application for what they wanted to do and put up the story polls, and it was considered incomplete, and they got an incomplete letter, and it's not even scheduled for architectural review yet. Possibly sometime in the new year. One thing that they did not submit was their historic preservation, their historic report. So when that gets submitted, it will become part of the public record. Staff will have a chance to review it. If the project has been considered consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards, then it would go to to ARC. If it has not been considered consistent, then it would go to HPC.
No, wait, say that again. If it is consistent with the standards for historic, it goes straight to ARC?
It would
Wouldn't
go,
it go to,
it would go to to ARC. So staff never makes the decision ourselves as to where something goes. It's based on the input from the architectural historian.
So staff does not decide whether a project goes to ARC or HPC. That's in the city code. And then the historian provides the consistency determination with the secretary standards.
the other, and that's the other concern too. And I don't know how we can fix this problem, but it seems that if, and we have people here on the commission that actually have Millsack House, have gone through the process, so maybe they know. So would a person who wants to make a change in their house, would they pick a historian that might say they shouldn't do it because it's historic, or would they pick one that says it's not that historic? They can do it. So
Yeah, who says what they want, yeah.
so they pick the historian who supports what they want to do, right?
I
mean, why would you
I
pay
don't
it for a
know.
historian to enter an opinion that's contrary to what you want to do if you're the homeowner?
We don't know why they pick the historian that they pick, but the historians they need to have follow the professional standards of being an architectural historian. And so they can't be biased. They have to follow, it's in the
That's what we
They-
would expect. But I think over time, sitting here, sometimes we hear what things can be changed and what things can't be changed. And sometimes they say, well, putting Mediterranean looking plaster over a historic house deems it unhistoric because it's been a huge modification, but we've completed Millsacks on properties where they have put the Mediterranean plaster that over the little wood exterior. So there's some inconsistencies with the way it's window treatment as well.
There
So
are,
that's the problem over time we see. Sometimes the historian's report will say, oh no, the plaster makes all the difference in the world, or and sometimes it doesn't. So it's confusing when you're basing everything on those reports. And the people that are paying for them want them to support what they want to do. It puts some pressure on the situation. I'm not saying they're not ethical. I believe some of those specialists do tell the property owners, I can't really help you do what you want to do because my report will say this is a historic home, probably they have those discussions. Would you say that would happen?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, and, I'm just raising that as a concern.
Yeah.
Carol has
I
her hand up.
just, if, since we get the report, the city gets the report, they want to put an addition on, and sometimes additions are in the eye of the beholder, whether it meets the standards. What concerns me is then it goes to ARC, who does not have the training or the background
Mhm.
to make the final recommendation if this meets the standard. So I guess it would, in my mind, it would be preferable if it came to us instead of ARC, because ARC generally, well, you were on ARC, is concerned with all kinds of other things. Is it blocking somebody's view? Is it, they have
Things
to
we've
cut down
never
a
dealt-
tree or whatever. So I think since we deal with the historic aspects, it would make more sense.
so the ARC receives a copy of the historian's report though, when they're in their packet. So they have the historian's recommendation to review when they make their own recommendation. And we will not bring a project forward to the ARC if the historian's recommendation is that the project is inconsistent with the standards.
If the historian says the project's inconsistent,
We will not bring it to ARC.
right, but if the historian says it is consistent, and I guess I look at us as the community standard, because a lot of this is squishy. How big of an addition is too big to be not compatible? So I just,
Okay.
so whoever's writing the letter to Kim Cole, that's.
One
Carol.
other thing that I think we should consider is, coming from a property owner's perspective, if you add on yet another commission that they have to go to, I mean, the property owner pays for each commission. I would suggest that there be one fee. If whether you go to ARC only or whether you go to HPC, ARC, because it's really not fair to the poor property owner to have to pay for each review.
That would be part of your, in your letter as a
Right.
Yeah.
suggestion.
Definitely.
So, when I was on ARC, there were a couple projects that came to both, the HPC and ARC, at the same time, and it was kind of rare, but it happened a
That's
couple
right,
times.
we had concurrent.
Concurrent meetings,
Meeting.
so that might be a way to do the one fee and then have input from
Right.
both.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
We haven't had concurrent meetings for several years, but at one time, it seemed like almost once a year we had a concurrent meeting.
yeah.
I can remember at least two.
Yeah.
I've been on it for at least 2 meetings. I remember working with the ARC.
And that was a good way, I think.
I haven't
to handle it.
experienced in 4.5 years. I have not
But
experienced
But
that
we did do
We
that.
did at least one.
in the last few years.
We haven't, but that's one way to look at it.
Maybe before you.
Okay.
It must have been just before me.
If you write the letter, then that could be a proposal.
It's a thought. So, and I think some of these things take more than, we're just posing it as something where there could be some need for analysis, and working together. So thank you for that. So let's look at I guess we're still with you have anything you want to say in closing and then we move to the staff? Lori?
Oh, yeah. I forwarded an email to Fernanda and it's a link to watch a WPA. They have they put on programs. And this one was very interesting because it was about two female photographers, one of whom is actually quite well known in the peninsula because she took that famous picture of El Cuartel that, you see a lot. And it was, her history, her background, other photographs that she had done. So I'm hoping that Fernanda will forward that to you. And if you have time, you can watch it. I think they have links to YouTube.
Okay, thank you. I'll forward it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Did anybody have anything? And staff has mentioned the other things that are happening. So I know I'm involved in Christmas in the Adobe, and I believe Kathy is, and we want to be sure to invite the community to enjoy Christmas in the Adobes. That is a time we can go in to many historic buildings and privately owned state park buildings, City of Monterey buildings, and actually, get behind the walls and see how nice they are. And in many of them, there will be music, and it's really a lovely event. And I have a lot of appreciation for state parks that they put that on, and all the cooperating owners and that open their buildings for the public. And I just want to say thank you for having that event. Do you want to say something too, Fernanda?
Yeah, so the dates are tomorrow, actually, right?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow and Saturday.
Right.
And then we also noted that the Christmas carolers perform in Old Monterey on Alvarado every Saturday, starting this Sunday till the 24th from 12 to 4 p.m. And then on New Year's Eve is the 30th anniversary of the first night celebration. That's in downtown mainly.
And if I can just add one more thing, maybe it's not cultural, but then the carolers downtown is similar to everything going on the wharf too through the 18th. Besides visiting Santa, but they have carolers and you can join in. I think it's 5 to 6:30 on the weekends. That you can sing with some church. I'm sorry, I can't
Nice. I think
see where
different
I didn't highlight the
community
church. Oh,
groups can do
His
it.
Grace Ministries International Church. No wonder I couldn't remember that. Yes, that you can sing with them 5 to 6:30 on Sundays. Oh, through the 18th.
Are we about ready to? So I think we just announced that we're ready to close the meeting. Thank you so much for all the work.
Yeah.
So the meeting is adjourned.
Have a good holiday season with your families.
We really enjoyed that.
Mhm.
It was just great.